Don't move or I will empty this mag into you. Step out of the vehicle right now.
Get off me! I didn't do anything!
Shut up! You're under arrest!
Imani kept her hands flat at 10 and 2, whispering her compliance into the dark. But he wrenched the door open anyway, hauling her out by the hair and slamming her face first onto the muddy concrete shoulder.
A black woman moving this kind of weight in a Malibu? You street mules really think this skin tone blends into the dark out here?
Halloran let out a low, guttural laugh as he threw 2 bricks of seized heroin into her open trunk, and in the same greedy motion, seized the federal duffel bag sitting beside them. $500,000 in cash.
That isn't mine! You just planted that!
Who are they gonna believe, sweetheart? 2 decorated task force officers or a street animal crying in the dirt?
He never checked her collar. He had no idea that the coin-sized wire beneath her jacket was live streaming every single word to an armored federal van 3 miles away. The woman he was degrading was a deep-cover federal agent, and in exactly 9 hours, that badge on his chest was going to become his noose. Welcome back to the channel. Before we go any further, drop a comment below and let me know exactly where in the world you're watching from tonight. Now, let's go back to that dark, rain-slicked causeway. To the hour before this, when the trap was just about to spring shut. The city didn't have a name that mattered out here. Out here, it was just Merrill Reach. A 2-lane causeway that ran along a dead shipping channel, flanked by rusted grain elevators and warehouses that hadn't held anything but pigeons since the port moved south. At 2 in the morning, in November rain, the Reach was the loneliest road in the state. No streetlights that worked. No cameras that weren't cataracts. No witnesses. If you wanted a place to do something and be certain no one would ever see, the Reach was where you went. That was exactly why Imani Cole had chosen it. She was 33 years old. And for 14 months, she had not been Imani Cole. She had been Simone Vega, a logistics broker, a woman who moved product for people who could not afford to be seen moving it themselves, a cold quantity in a bad business. She had learned to talk like Simone, to walk like Simone, to think one clean layer removed from her own heartbeat. Deep cover isn't a costume. It's an amputation you perform on yourself, and reperform every single morning. Tonight, Operation Slackwater was 14 months of that amputation coming to a point. The target was a distributor named Preston DeShaw, a careful man, a paranoid man, a man who moved millions through burner phones and dead drops and never once touched a gram himself. Imani had bled to get close to him. Sleep, birthdays, the sound of her own name. She'd spent all of it building an indictment that would hold in federal court and put DeShaw somewhere he would die. In the trunk of the gray, Malibu sat a heavy black canvas duffel, $500,000 in unmarked, non-sequential bills, federal buy money, authorized for a controlled purchase large enough to end DeShaw for good, and under the collar of her cheap leather jacket rode a state-of-the-art transmitter, no thicker than a coin. 3 miles back, in an armored surveillance van that smelled of coffee and ozone, her boss listened to her breathe. "You're clean to the meat, Simone." The voice in her ear belonged to Victor Sloan, assistant special agent in charge, the man who had run her for a year and a half and slept about as much as she had. Extractions staged. Say the word and the whole thing collapses on my count. Zope. Imani murmured, barely moving her lips. Rain hissed under the tires. Everything was proceeding with surgical precision. The streets, though, keep a heartbeat of their own. And tonight, it skipped 2 miles away, in an unmarked cruiser parked in the black mouth of a loading dock. Officer Cody Vance tapped the wheel in a private, greedy rhythm. Vance was 29, and he believed, in the marrow of him, that the world was divided into predators and prey, and that a badge had made him the former. Beside him, Sergeant Russ Halloran filled the passenger seat like sandbags, 51 years old. 3 tours of the department behind him. A sneer worn so deep it had become the resting shape of his face. You need to understand what these 2 men were. Because the story does not work if you think of them as men who made a mistake. They did not make a mistake. They had a business. They were assigned to the city's anti-gang task force. And years ago, they had quietly stopped enforcing the law and started competing with it. Their method was simple, and it was profitable. They found mid-level dealers. They ran illegal stops. They took the drugs and the cash. And then, this was the elegant part. The part they were proud of. They planted a fraction of their own seized product to justify the arrest. They kept the money. They resold the good product through their own people. And the department, looking only at their arrest numbers, called them effective. They targeted the guilty because the guilty cannot call the police to report a robbery committed by the police. It was, Halloran liked to say, a victimless crime. As long as you were careful about who you decided didn't count as a victim, here is a number the department knew and did nothing with. 41. 41 civilian complaints had been filed against Vance and Halloran over 6 years. 38 of them came from black and brown residents of the districts they patrolled. And the number of times either man had ever been disciplined, suspended, retrained, so much as spoken to sternly, was 0. That 0 did not happen by accident. That 0 had a name, and the name was Deputy Chief Owen Marsh, who for 14 years had stamped the word unfounded across those complaints and filed them where the sun does not reach. This is the thing the genre teaches badly, and the truth teaches hard. 2 bad men are a tragedy. 2 bad men and a system that shields them are a machine. This was a machine, 8 months before the rain on Merrill Reach. That machine had swallowed a 19-year-old named Marcus Bell. He'd been driving his mother's Corolla home from the back half of a double shift at a warehouse job. Radio low. Both hands on the wheel. Because his mother had drilled that into him since he was 15. Hands where they can see them. Yes, sir. No, sir. Don't reach for anything. It didn't matter. Vance decided the Corolla fit a description. And a description is a net you can cast as wide as you need it. They tore the car apart on the shoulder while Marcus stood in the cold reciting his own compliance, the way Imani would later recite hers. And when they found nothing, they simply made something. 2 kilos came out of Halloran's cargo pocket and went into the trunk, and Marcus Bell stopped being a kid with a double shift and became, on paper, a trafficker. His mother, Gloria, worked nights cleaning an office tower and raised him alone, and had never in her life so much as jaywalked. And she stood in a courtroom and said the only true thing there was to say, "My son is innocent." They put that in his car. "I know my son." She said it plainly, without hysteria, because she had learned young that a black woman who raises her voice in a room like that loses before she finishes the sentence. And the judge looked at her, and the prosecutor looked at her, and the bailiff by the door looked at her, and every one of them looked at her the way you look at weather. A thing that happens. A thing you wait out. A thing that has no standing to argue. The public defender had 90 other files. Bail was set at a number that might as well have been the moon. Marcus was still in Kessler County lockup right now, on the far side of a scratched partition, waiting on a trial that kept sliding down the calendar. Remember him. He is the reason this story exists. And everything that is about to happen to Cody Vance and Russ Halloran is, in the end, just the long way around. Back to him. Earlier that evening, one of Vance's informants had passed along a whisper, Somebody was moving serious capital through the industrial corridor tonight. A woman, gray Malibu, sitting on a gold mine. The informant knew nothing about Preston DeShaw, nothing about the DEA, nothing about Simone Vega. He knew only that there was money on the reach and no cartel behind it. $500,000. Russ. Vance breathed, watching a pair of taillights swing onto the causeway, just riding around in the trunk of some independent contractor. Halloran chuckled. Low and wet. Independent means nobody comes looking. We take her. We take the bag. We drop a couple bricks of that brown we kept from the Delacorte raid in the back seat. She goes down for trafficking. We go to the Bahamas. Case closed. A flawless plan. They'd run it a dozen times. They pulled out behind the Malibu and let the distance close. Simone. Sloane's voice sharpened in her ear. You've got a tail. Unmarked unit. City plates. DeShaw's people. She said softly. Test the assumption. Negative. The tension in the van climbed a full register. Varenit. It's a local task force car. And local PD is not looped into Slackwater. We kept them out on purpose. To prevent leaks. Imani. They are flying blind. They don't know who you are. She didn't have time to build a plan. The light bar behind her erupted. Red and blue strobing across the rain. And a single hard bark of the siren slapped off the concrete faces of the dead warehouses. They're pulling me over, she whispered, easing onto the brake. Stand down. Fast. Flat. Play the civilian. Do not blow your cover. DeShaw's scouts could be anywhere on this route. If they see Simone Vega, flash a federal badge to slide out of a stop. 14 months is smoke. You'd be burning a whole neighborhood's chance at getting these people off the street. Endure it. Imani understood the grim arithmetic. To take a kingpin, you eat the dirt. She pulled on to the gravel shoulder. Gravel crunching under the idle. Rain drumming the roof. Then she did the thing she had been trained to do. The survival protocol that every black driver in this country learns, whether they carry a badge or not. She killed the engine. She rolled all 4 windows down into the rain. She set the keys on the dash where a flashlight could find them. She put both hands at 10 and 2. Flat and open. And as the 2 figures climbed out of the cruiser and their boots hit the puddles, she narrated her own body into the wire. Both hands are on the wheel, she said. For the record, for the server 3 miles away, I am not reaching for anything. This is not fear. This is protocol. There is a difference. And the difference is the whole story. Understand what that protocol is. And where it comes from. It is not something the DEA taught her at Quantico. It is something her father taught her in a parked car when she was 15 years old. The same way Gloria Bell taught it to Marcus. The same way it gets taught in 100,000 kitchens and driveways in this country. To children of a certain complexion. Kill the engine so they can hear that you're not going to run. Put your hands where a nervous man can see them. Announce every movement before you make it. Do not give a scared person with a gun a single reason to invent one. It is a choreography of survival that half the country performs on instinct, and the other half has never once had to learn. Imani Cole had 2 ways of knowing it. She knew it as a federal agent who understood the tactical logic of it cold, and she knew it as a black woman on a dark road, in her body, in a place older than her training. Tonight, both women in her did the same thing at the same time, and the fact that she needed the second one at all, the fact that a decorated federal agent was reciting both hands are on the wheel into a wire to keep herself alive during a routine stop, is the quiet indictment the whole night is built on. She was the most protected driver on that causeway, and she still had to dance. Boots splashed toward the driver's door. Vance came up first. A heavy flashlight held high. The beam aimed square into her eyes on purpose. Halloran drifted to the rear quarter panel, one hand resting easy on the grip of his weapon. License. Registration. Insurance. Now. Vance's voice dripped with a borrowed authority. She squinted into the light and gave him Simone. Mildly annoyed. Entirely compliant. Officer. Is there a problem I was heading home? I don't think I was speeding. Didn't ask for the commentary. He leaned in. And the smell of cold coffee and old cigarettes came in with the rain. And then he said the quiet part out loud. The way men like him always eventually do. A woman like you. In a car like this. On a road like this. At this hour, the math kind of writes itself. Doesn't it? You people always figure you can talk your way through a thing. You people. There it is. He didn't need a slur. The two words did the work. They drew the line he'd already drawn in his head between who belonged on this road and who was a problem to be processed. In the van, Sloane's jaw was a fault line. On the wire, every syllable landed on a federal server. Time-stamped. Permanent. Imani reached slowly. Deliberately. Hands always visible. Into the glove box. And produced the forged documents that made her Simone Vega. Vance took them. He did not read them. He slid them into his own pocket. Step out of the vehicle. For a broken taillight, she let a thread of real-sounding fear into it. I don't feel comfortable getting out in the rain. Officer. And that was when it stopped being a traffic stop. Don't move. Or I will empty this mag into you. He didn't shout it. At first. He said it almost gently. And then he swung the heavy flashlight into the window. Once. Twice. Until the glass burst inward across her lap. Step out of the vehicle. Right now. He wrenched the door open. Closed a fist in her hair. And hauled her out into the wet dark. She didn't fight it. She let herself go down. And she made certain the mic caught the flat. Sick thud of her body meeting the mud. Because Simone Vega would be terrified, and Imani Cole would be building a case. And tonight she was both. He drove her face first onto the concrete shoulder, the cold coming up through her cheek, and leaned his weight over her, a black woman. Moving this kind of weight. In a Malibu. He was almost laughing now. You, street mules, really think this skin tone just blends into the dark out here? Pop the trunk. Hus. He called over the rain. Halloran didn't bother with a warrant. He didn't mouth the words, probable cause. He hit the release. Imani turned her head just enough to watch him lift the lid on $500,000. He unzipped the duffel. And even in the dead light of a single working lamp, the banded currency was staggering. His breath caught. He looked up, met Vance's eyes, and something venomous and delighted passed between them. Well? 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 Halloran zipped the bag, swung it over his shoulder like it weighed nothing, and reached into his cargo pocket. Imani's trained eyes caught every motion. 2 dense rectangles wrapped in brown tape. 2 kilos. Seized from God knows where. Repurposed now into the perfect weapon. Guilt you can hold in your hand? He tossed the bricks into the open trunk. Right where the cash had been 3 seconds ago. Look what we got here. Cody? He announced it to the rain. In a theater voice meant for no one. Looks like a major trafficking operation. That isn't mine. She set it into the mud. Her voice terrifyingly level. You just planted that. I've never seen those before in my life. And here it is. The oldest beat in this whole ugly genre. The thing that makes the reveal weigh exactly as much as it will weigh. She told the truth. And he laughed at it. Vance grinned. Teeth in the shadow. And drove his knee into the small of her back. The cuffs came around her wrists, and he ratcheted them 3 clicks past necessary. past uncomfortable, into the skin. A small cruelty. A signature. Cold steel bit down until it broke the surface. And here's the wound. The whole case will one day photograph 2 rings of raw red, deep enough to matter, light enough that she could still stand, still think, still work. He put his mouth near her ear. Who are they gonna believe? Sweetheart, 2 decorated task force officers. Or a street animal crying in the dirt. You're going away for a long, long time. He said it. And Halloran said something worse under his breath. And the rain took it. And the wire kept it forever. He never checked her collar. They dragged her through the mud and folded her into the plastic cage of the back seat and slammed the door on the dark. In the van, 3 miles back. Sloane's knuckles had gone white on the console, and 4 tactical agents were begging him with their eyes to move. Hold. His voice came out like something being crushed. Hold your positions. Let them commit the crime. We have high-def audio and dash from the wire. We are about to bag 2 dirty cops in Deshaw in one night. Do not move on my agent's assault. She knew the risk. He stopped. Because there is no clean way to finish that sentence. And we will come back to the fact that there isn't, for exactly 1 second. In the darkness of the back seat, Imani Cole let Simone go. Something cold and level came over her face. Then she put the mask back on and shifted her shoulder so the coin under her collar had a clean line to the sky. I copy all of that. Victor. She breathed to no one. They took the bag, the bricks, all of it. We've got them admitting the frame and the theft. Cope. Sloane's voice came back, laced with a dangerous patient satisfaction. Imani. I know it's miserable. Write it out through booking. We need them to log the fake product and sign the arrest report. The second their signatures hit those documents, the trap is welded shut. The Bureau's public corruption unit is already spinning up. Up front. The 2 men were euphoric. The duffel of federal money sat on the floorboards between them like a trophy. $500K. Easy. Halloran whispered, slapping the dash. 60-40. Offshore. Let the public defender babysit her. Vance laughed and pulled off the shoulder, leaving the Malibu for an impound truck, leaving the reach to the rain. And here is the small technical detail neither of them registered. The one that reaches out of an earlier moment to end them. 40 seconds before he had walked up to her window, Vance had reached to his chest and held the button on his body camera for 3 full seconds. Until it powered down. Halloran had done the exact same thing. 2 dark cameras, 2 men who knew precisely what they were about to do, and did not want a lens to know it. The cameras logged the shutdown. Metadata does not take bribes. The ride to Precinct 51 was a nightmare of noise. The 2 of them spent the stolen money out loud. A beach. A boat. A car wash front to launder it through. Narrating their whole conspiracy to a woman they'd decided was furniture. Every syllable transmitting to a federal server they didn't know existed. The 51st was a fluorescent purgatory. They hauled her out and marched her past a dozen officers who didn't look up. She was pushed into processing, made to strip off the wet jacket, empty her pockets. Against the wall, flashes, fingerprints rolled. Simone Vega was formally entered into the criminal justice system as a major narcotics trafficker. And she let it happen without a word. There was one young officer at the intake desk who did look up. Bailey Novak was 24 and 3 weeks into the job. And something about the scene snagged on her. The woman was too calm. The cuffs were too tight. Novak could see the raw at the wrists, could see the blood starting where the steel had bitten. And there was the paperwork. Vance had logged 2 kilos. And Novak noticed. had logged no cash at all. And that was strange, because whispers travel a precinct. And the whisper tonight had been about a bag of money. Novak opened her mouth. Vance looked at her. Just looked. A flat little warning from a man who ran this floor. And she closed it. She told herself it wasn't her business. That Vance was a decorated cop, and she was 3 weeks old. That she must be reading it wrong. She let it go. Write that down too. The only good person in the building failed the first time. They almost always do. What she does next is what matters. But not yet. Lock her in holding 3. Vance told the booking officer, no calls till she's fully processed. Flight risk. The steel door of holding cell 3 slammed. And the clang finalized it. Imani sat down on the cold bench in a smell of bleach, laid over something the bleach had never once defeated. And she did not cry. She counted, you should sit in these 9 hours with her. Because the other stories skip them. And skipping them is how they turn a human being into a plot device. So, don't skip them. The first hour is adrenaline. The body is still a live wire. Still braced for the next hand on the arm. And the mind runs the tape back over and over. The flashlight. The 2 words. The thud of metal. The click past necessary. Cataloging. Timestamping. Refusing to let a single detail decay. Her mind was a steel trap in that first hour. And it was building a federal civil rights case one piece at a time. The number on the wall clock. The number on the cell. The exact phrasing on the affidavit she'd watched Vance's pen move across. The 2 rings of raw around her wrists that throbbed now in time with her pulse. By the 3rd hour, the adrenaline is gone. And what's left is the cold. It comes up through the steel bench and into the bone, and it does not leave. An officer walked the block and looked in at her and made a small sound of disgust. The sound you save for the absolute worst of what you think society produces. And then he moved on. And she absorbed it without a flicker. Because Simone Vega would have glared, and Imani Cole could not afford to be anything but Simone. That is the discipline. Nobody films. Not the arrest. The 9 hours of holding your own face still while people who have already decided what you are walk past and confirm it to each other with their eyes. Somewhere in the 5th hour, the way it always happens when the body finally stops fighting, the wall came down for a moment, and her actual life came through it. The birthdays she'd missed, the calls she hadn't returned, the sound of her own real name, which she had not said out loud, or heard anyone say. In 14 months, somewhere in the 6th hour, she thought about the fact that there was no cavalry coming. Not tonight. That Sloane had told her to ride it out, and she had agreed, and the agreement was correct. And it still meant she was going to sit in a cage until a machine finished doing its slow, silent work. There is a particular loneliness to being the bait in your own trap, to knowing you are the smartest person in the building, and having to perform being the most disposable, and underneath all of it, in every one of those 9 hours, ran the same cold current that keeps a person like her alive. I am not the one who should have to endure this to be believed. Somewhere out there is a Marcus who did not have a wire, who is enduring exactly this right now. And no van is coming for him either. She would sit on that bench for 9 hours. She did not sleep. She counted them all. 1 to 9. Because the machine that would answer for every single one was already turning, 3 miles and a world away, across town, in the affluent quiet of a suburb called Oakhurst. Vance and Halloran were celebrating in Vance's detached garage, a fortified little room where they did their off-the-books arithmetic. On a workbench, ringed with empty bottles, sat $500,000 in banded stacks. This is the exit. Russ, Vance said, running his fingers over the crisp paper. 6 months through the car wash, and we're ghosts. Costa Rica. Wherever. We earned it. Halloran took a long pull of his beer. And here the genre owes the man his 1 human minute. Because monsters who know they're monsters are boring. And this one didn't. City pays us peanuts to catch bullets in neighborhoods nobody in a suit will ever drive through. You know what I am. I'm the line. I'm the thin line between those streets and the nice ones. And nobody thanks the line. This is just the line collecting what it's owed. He believed it. That's the horror of him. He wasn't lying to Vance. He was lying to himself. And he'd been doing it so long the seam didn't show. What neither of them understood was that the moment Halloran unzipped that duffel on the reach, he had triggered an avalanche that made no sound. Every bill on that bench was micromarked, and its serial number logged in an encrypted federal database. That is all you need to know about how. The machine was named long before tonight, and it does not require a manual, and woven into the canvas lining of the bag, thinner than a sheet of paper, was a GPS transmitter that had been quietly reporting the bag's position since the second they took it. In a secure command center downtown, Suck, Victor Sloan and Special Agent Priya Anand of the FBI's Public Corruption Unit watched a red dot hold steady over a garage in Oakhurst. Pin sharp. Patient. They just parked $500,000 of tracked federal currency in a private garage. Anand said. She did not smile. Exactly. And I'd bet the deed's in his name. In the same building, a young officer named Bailey Novak was standing at a terminal she wasn't supposed to be at, cross-referencing an evidence number that had been eating at her all night. The batch stamp on the 2 kilos logged against the woman she'd watched come through booking. The screen didn't hesitate. The batch didn't come back clean. It came back flagged. That lot number was chain of custody product from the Delacorte warehouse raid. Evidence that was supposed to be in a sealed locker. Evidence that had been quietly reported destroyed 8 months ago. On a form Vance had signed, the terminal did the thing this whole genre lives for. It went red. And it locked. And it printed a line Novak would one day testify to under oath. Restricted. Custody anomaly. This query has been logged. Novak went pale before she'd said a single word. That is how the machine talks. It doesn't shout. It just refuses to lie for you. And across the county, in the visiting line at Kessler Lockup, Gloria Bell sat down across a scratched partition from her son Marcus for the 14th Sunday in a row and told him, the way she told him every week, that she was not going to stop. She had no idea that a federal database had just lit up around the exact evidence lot that had put him in that chair. She was the reason all of this would matter. She just didn't know it yet. 9 hours in, Sloan finally got a secure line to the holding block. Imani took the handset, the way a prisoner takes a call. And to anyone watching, she was still Simone. It's welded. Sloan said. They logged the drugs. Vance signed the affidavit. The money's tracked to a garage in his name. Anand's writing warrants. We come get you in a few hours. Copy, Imani said. And then, because a person is not a piece of equipment, no matter how the operation talks about her. She said the thing. The operation would rather she hadn't. Victor, have you ever sat on one of these benches? A silence on the line. In the van, 4 agents pretended to check equipment. No, Sloan said. No, I haven't. 9 hours. She said, not angry. Levo, you told me to write it out. And I wrote it out. And it was the right call. And I'd make it again. But somebody in a warm room decided a black woman should sit in a cage for 9 hours. So that a case would be a little cleaner. And you called that good tradecraft? I just want one person in this to say it out loud. Before we all go get medals for it. She let it land. That's all. I'm ready when you are. The line stayed quiet. Nobody answered her. Because there is no answer that survives being said. That silence is the valve. Leave it open. Downtown. Priya Anand pulled a case file that had been flagged by the same custody anomaly and read a name off the top of it. Bell. Marcus. 19. She read the arresting officers. She read the batch number. She sat very still for a moment. And then she picked up the phone and said the sentence that turns a sting into a reckoning. I need every arrest Vance and Halloran ever made that touched the Delacourt evidence lot. Every single one. Starting with the kid. They should have been suspicious when the summons came. They weren't. Because arrogance is a kind of blindness that feels like clarity. The call came over the precinct PA the next morning. Formal and clipped. Officer Vance. Sergeant Halloran. Report to the captain's office. Dress uniforms. Halloran actually laughed. Dress blues. They only call for blues when they're pinning something on your chest. He straightened his tie in the reflection of a dead monitor. 2 kilos of poison off the street. Cody. We're local heroes. They walk the bullpen with their chests out. And junior officers stepped aside for them. Unaware. Vance knocked once on the frosted glass of the captain's door and pushed it open on his little coronation. The room was not full of brass and press. Captain Harold Boyd sat behind his desk. And Boyd was a gray color, his hands flat on the blotter, like a man bracing for turbulence. Flanking him stood 4 people in dark tactical vests, with FBI stamped across the chest in hard yellow. By the window stood Captain Ruth Delgado, head of Internal Affairs, holding a thick manila folder like a verdict, and in the center of the room, arms crossed over a crisp black suit, stood a stranger neither of them had ever seen. But both of them would remember for 25 years. Asak, Victor Sloan. Dea, and standing just behind Delgado, small and still and unmistakably present, was Officer Bailey Novak. 3 weeks on the job, holding a printout with a red header. She had made her choice sometime in the night. She had pulled the custody log, seen the red, and instead of going back to bed, she had walked it into Internal Affairs at 4 in the morning. Watch her. She is more of the point than either federal agent in this room. Vance's mouth opened. You wanted to see us. The words dried up in his throat. What is this? Halloran's face drained. Yavslag. His eyes ricocheting from his captain to the feds. What the hell is this? Agent Priya Anand stepped forward. A pair of heavy federal handcuffs turning slow in her fingers. Sergeant Halloran. Officer Vance. Come in. Close the door. We have a great deal to discuss about your retirement. I don't understand. Vance reached for indignation and found only its shape. We're in the middle of writing up a major narcotics bust. Are you? It wasn't a question. The way Sloan said it. He reached into his coat and set a small black device on the desk. An audio player. And he pressed a single button. And the room filled with a crisp, high-def recording. And under it, faint and unmistakable, the sound of rain on a car roof. 500,000. Russ. We take her. We take the bag. We drop a couple bricks of that brown in the back seat. She goes down for trafficking. We go to the Bahamas. Vance's knees tried to buckle. He knew that voice. He knew that rain. He was listening to himself. Sloan let it play a beat longer than mercy required. Then clicked it off. You should check a suspect for a federal transmitting wire, he said, without any heat at all. Before you brag about robbing the government. This is a setup. Halloran's voice cracked into panic. That audio's doctored. The woman we arrested is Simone Vega. She's a known cartel associate. Is she? The door behind them opened. They spun. And standing in the doorway was the woman they had shoved face first into the mud on Marrow Reach. 9 hours and one entire lifetime ago. But she was not wearing the cheap leather jacket. And there was no terror in her face. She wore the formal tactical uniform of the Drug Enforcement Administration, a gold badge burning at her belt, her sidearm secured at her hip, and her wrists, both of them, carried 2 rings of raw red where his handcuffs had bitten. She made no effort to hide them. She let them show. The wound was going into the record whether he liked it or not. Now, the original ending of stories like this is a triumphant line. A personal mic drop. Revenge served warm. That is not the story we're telling. Because the machine had already done the work. She hadn't come to reveal herself. She'd come to make sure they understood that the system, not her wounded pride, was what had them. Special Agent Imani Cole. She said it, and her voice was quiet, and quiet was so much worse. Dea. Special Operations. I want you to hear this clearly. Because you're going to spend the next 25 years wanting to believe that a person beat you. A person didn't. You logged the evidence. You signed the report. You tracked the money into your own garage. You turned your own cameras off. And the cameras wrote that down. Every single thing that ends you tonight. You built with your own 2 hands. She looked from one man to the other. You didn't rob a mule. You robbed the United States government on a live federal wire. And you did it because you decided what I was the second your flashlight hit my face. She took 1 step closer to Vance. And her voice dropped even lower. And it became the lowest, quietest, most terrible thing he had ever heard in his life. You want to know the part that should keep you up at night for the rest of it, she said. It isn't that you picked the wrong woman. It's why you picked me. You didn't run my plate. You didn't check my registration. You didn't do a single thing an officer is supposed to do before he decides that a human being is a criminal. You looked at my face in your flashlight, and my car, and my skin, and this road, and you did the math you'd already done 1,000 times before. And you were so certain of the answer that you never once bothered to check it. She held his eyes. That certainty is the whole reason you're good at this. It's how you found Marcus Bell. It's how you found 40 other people who couldn't fight back. I could fight back. That is the only difference between me and every single one of them. Not that I was innocent and they were guilty, that I had a wire, and a badge, and a Vaughn. And you need to understand one thing before they take you out of here. I am not the reason this is finally going to answer to you. They are. I just happen to be the one it couldn't afford to ignore. No, Vance whispered, backing away until his shoulders hit the wall. No, 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 no. Anan didn't wait. She took Vance by the arm, spun him, and put him against the wall with the exact unnecessary force he'd used on the reach. The ratchets of the cuffs echoed in the small office. Click, click. His own sound. Coming home, Cody Vance. Russell Helleran. Her voice was iron. You're under arrest for conspiracy to distribute narcotics. Theft of federal funds. Evidence tampering. Perjury. And deprivation of rights, under color of law. You have the right to remain silent. I'd use it. The bullpen watched them marched out in chains. There were no high fives this time. The illusion of the untouchable empire cracked all the way through. In front of everyone. Permanently. And then it almost fell apart. Because here is what those other stories never tell you. Catching them is not the hard part. Catching them was a wire. And a database. And one honest rookie. The hard part is the machine that Deputy Chief Owen Marsh had been running for 14 years. And that machine did not roll over just because 2 of its pieces got cuffed within 48 hours. The police union had lawyers on television. The word they chose was entrapment. That the feds had lured two hardworking officers into a setup, dangled bait no cop could resist, and now wanted to destroy careers over it. Sal Coyne, the union rep, was very good on camera and very warm about the Widows and Orphans Fund. And then the administrative knife came out of a drawer nobody expected. The internal affairs case. Ruth Delgado's case. The one built on Novak's custody log and 41 buried complaints, was abruptly reassigned for jurisdictional review to a deputy commissioner named Alan Pruitt. Deputy Commissioner Pruitt happened to be the brother-in-law of a city councilman. Pruitt happened to owe Owen Marsh several favors, and Pruitt happened to sit on that internal affairs file and quietly moved to have the wire ruled inadmissible on a technicality about the operation's local notification. And the entire reckoning began to slide backward, into the dark, where the other 41 complaints had gone to die. Ruth Delgado sat across from Priya Anand in a windowless office at midnight and said the sentence that is the black heart of this genre. The sentence that 14 out of 15 of these stories are too comfortable to ever say. They're not going to beat the evidence. The evidence is airtight. She rubbed her eyes. They're going to beat the system that's supposed to weigh the evidence. That's how it's always worked. That's how Marcus Bell is still in Kessler. We didn't lose because they were innocent. We're losing because the machine that shields them is bigger than the case against them. Imani heard it in a conference room downtown. Standing at a window while a lawyer she'd never met explained, on a speakerphone, why the wire she had worn against her own skin for 14 months might never reach a jury. She listened to a career's worth of danger get reframed in real time. As a stunt. She listened to 2 words. You people. That a man had said to her face on a black road. Get folded into a sentence about aggressive federal tactics. And she understood. Standing there, the exact same thing Gloria Bell had understood 8 months earlier in a courtroom. That the truth is not enough. That the truth has never been enough. That the truth still has to pass through a machine built by people who have already decided whose truth counts. She thought about Marcus Bell, on the far side of a partition, and how his mother had told the truth plainly and been treated like weather. And how this administrative knife sliding a file into a drawer was the same weather, just wearing a suit and a title now. Instead of a badge and a flashlight, same machine, different floor, for about a day. It looked like Vance and Halloran might walk, quietly reinstated. Pensions intactes. The wire thrown out. A black agent's 9 hours in a cage. And a 19-year-old's 8 months in a cell. Both rebranded as regrettable overreach. All of it was lost. The way out was hidden inside the very act of the burial. At 2:47 inches the morning, Priya Anand made a call. Not to a prosecutor. To a 19-year-old's mother, Mrs. Bell. She said, My name is Priya Anand. I'm a federal agent. I've been reading your son's file. A pause. I think you have been telling the truth for 8 months. I'm calling because I need it on the record. And because I think the same men and the same evidence locker put him where he is. Would you be willing to help me prove it? Gloria Bell had waited 8 months for one single person with a badge to say the words, I think you've been telling the truth. She said yes before Anand had even finished the sentence, and then the hatch swung fully open. And it was a beautiful thing, because the villains had built it themselves. Delgado's team went at Pruitt's jurisdictional review. And the moment a deputy commissioner reaches into an active federal civil rights investigation to bury it, that reach is not administrative housekeeping. It is obstruction of a federal civil rights investigation. It is itself a federal crime. Marsh's machine, trying to swallow the case, had swallowed a hook. The instant Pruitt moved that file, he handed the FBI a brand new count and a brand new target. and the case stopped being about two dirty cops and became about the whole rotted chain that had protected them. The Bureau escalated. Federal warrants, signed by a federal judge, bypassing every local channel Marsh could poison. And 2 days later, at Dum, a federal task force served one of those warrants on a detached garage in Oakhurst. The red dot had never moved. On the workbench, exactly where the GPS had said it would be for 6 straight days, sat $500,000 in banded federal currency, every serial number matching the log, and in a footlocker beside it, the balance of the Delacourt evidence lot that Vance had certified as destroyed, the same lot that had framed Marcus Bell. When they walked the evidence out into the gray morning, Priya Anand did the thing that is the punctuation mark of this entire genre. In the federal building, in front of Marsh and the union lawyer, and a camera logging every second of it, Sloan took his own federal badge off his belt and set it flat on the steel table between them. And it was the loudest sound in the room. "This is what a badge is supposed to weigh," he said. "Yours weighed nothing. That's the whole difference." Owen Marsh lasted about 60 seconds under federal questioning before he sold out every officer he had ever protected. The brotherhood he thought he belonged to had only ever been an illusion, held together by shared guilt. And shared guilt evaporates the instant the cuffs go cold. He gave them names, dates, the entire architecture of the unfounded stamp. Deputy Commissioner Pruitt was indicted for obstruction that same week. The federal government showed no mercy at trial. And it didn't need any theatrics. It had a wire, a database, a GPS lining, a custody log gone red, 2 dark cameras that had logged their own shutdown, 40 seconds before a man decided to become a criminal, and a signature, Vance's own signature, dried on a falsified affidavit sworn under oath. The small, despised object that had been sitting in the file the whole time, waiting to become the perjury count that no lawyer alive could argue away. Imani Cole took the stand and dismantled every lie with the flat, surgical precision of a person who had counted every single second of 9 hours specifically so that one day she could do exactly this. She did not raise her voice once. She did not need to. The defense attorney tried the only door left to him, that she was a federal agent playing a role, that the entire encounter was theater, that a jury could not trust a professional deceiver. "You were, by your own testimony, pretending to be someone else that night," he said. "You lied about your name. You lied about your fear. Why should this jury believe a single word you say now? Because I am the only person in this room," Imani said, "who spent that night telling the truth into a wire that couldn't lie for anybody." She let that sit. "I played a civilian because my job required it. What your clients did to that civilian is on a federal server, in their own voices. Time-stamped. You don't have to believe me. You can believe them." They said all of it out loud. Then the prosecutor rose and put a photograph on the screen behind her. 2 rings of raw red around a woman's wrists, taken under the fluorescent light of a holding cell. The skin broken, where the steel had been ratcheted 3 clicks past anything a safe arrest could ever require. He didn't say a word about it. He just let it hang there. Enormous. In front of 12 strangers. And let the silence do the work. And in that silence, the case stopped being a stack of spreadsheets and serial logs and metadata, and became a thing every single person in that room could feel around their own wrists. The defense attorney did not cross-examine the photograph. There is no cross-examining a wound. Presiding over the sentencing was Judge Eleanor Pruitt, the same Judge Vance had bragged about, the one they had counted on to deny bail and bury, the woman they'd booked for 2 years before trial ever came. The loop closed with a sound like a lock. Pruitt looked down at them for a long moment. And when she finally spoke, it was with pity and with disgust in equal measure. You swore an oath to protect the most vulnerable people in this city, she said. Instead, you became the exact predators that oath exists to stop, and you chose your victims specifically, deliberately, because you had decided that no one would ever listen to them. Her gavel came up. You were almost right, and that is the part that should frighten every single person in this room. She sentenced them each to 25 years in federal prison. No parole. They gave Vance his human minute, the way the genre requires, and it was silence, not screaming. He didn't rage. He sat at the defense table after the sentence, not moving, staring at the middle distance. A young man watching the entire architecture of who he thought he was come down floor by floor, and he had no speech. Because there was no speech, and the absence of one was the truest thing he'd offered the whole trial. The department entered into a federal consent decree, not a press conference, not a suspension that quietly reverses itself in 6 months. A binding court order, forcing external oversight of every stop, every seizure, every complaint, with a monitor who did not answer to Owen Marsh or to anyone like him. That is the difference between punishing a man and fixing a machine. One is revenge. The other is the only thing that keeps the next 19-year-old out of the chair. And Marcus Bell, 8 months, 1 week, and 4 days after Vance dropped 2 bricks into his mother's Corolla. A federal review of the Delacorte evidence lot vacated his conviction. There was no ceremony. There was no press conference for Marcus Bell. That is worth noticing, that the men who framed him got cameras, and the boy they framed got a form. There was only a gate at Kessler County lockup that rolled open on a gray Tuesday, and a 19-year-old in county-issue clothes walking through it, out into a cold parking lot, blinking up at a sky he hadn't stood under in the better part of a year. And there was his mother, crossing that lot faster than a woman her age should be able to, still in the shapeless clothes she cleaned offices in, because she had come straight from a night shift, the very same way she had come straight from a night shift to every single one of the 14 Sundays she'd sat across a scratch partition and told him to keep his head up. Neither of them said anything at all when they reached each other. There was nothing to say that was bigger than the fact of it. She just held onto her son in a jail parking lot in the cold unsecond. And 8 months of a mother's rage and terror and refusal came out of her in a way that made no sound. Gloria Bell had stood in a courtroom and told the plain truth to a room full of people who looked at her like weather. It had cost her son the better part of a year of his life. She had lost her savings to a lawyer and her sleep to the fear, and had every reason in the world to go quiet, to accept that this is simply how it goes for people like her, and she had never once, not for a single Sunday, stopped saying the true thing. When the whole federal apparatus finally arrived, it did not arrive because it went looking for Marcus Bell. It arrived by accident, chasing a stolen $500,000, and stumbled over him on the way. His freedom was a byproduct. His mother's stubbornness was the only thing that was ever actually fighting for him. I told you to remember him. This is why, and Bailey Novak, 3 weeks on the job, who failed the first time, who let it go at the booking desk because she was young and afraid, and told herself she must be wrong. Bailey Novak had gotten up in the middle of the night, pulled a custody log she wasn't supposed to touch, and walked it into internal affairs. She testified. She sat in a federal courtroom and told 12 strangers exactly what the terminal had shown her, and exactly why it had made her go pale. And she did it with 2 decades of cop solidarity glaring at her from the gallery. When it was over, she did not get a medal. She got something rarer. She got to still be a person she could look at in the mirror. Here is the part those other stories get wrong. Zoe, listen close. The federal convictions, the 25 years, the consent decree, the deputy commissioner indicted, The deputy chief flipped. That is not the victory. That is the consequence. Consequence is what a system produces when you finally corner it with a wire and a rich enough defendant. Do not confuse the consequence for the win. The victory is a 19-year-old named Marcus Bell walking out of a county lockup 8 months too late. Into his mother's arms. The victory is Gloria Bell, who told the truth to a room that treated her like weather and never once stopped. Finally being believed. The victory is Bailey Novak, 3 weeks on the job, who got up in the dark and chose which kind of officer she was going to be for the next 30 years. None of the people who actually won this were the agent with the badge. They were the ones with no badge at all, and one who almost let hers make her small, and didn't. Imani Cole sat in the back of the courtroom when it was over. She didn't cheer. She didn't smile. She closed her eyes, exhaled a long breath. She felt like she'd been holding for 14 months, and stood up. She adjusted her jacket. There was always going to be another Deshaw, another marsh, another road with no cameras. She would be ready. But understand exactly why her story ends well. It ends well because there was a wire under her collar, and a gold badge in a locker downtown, and an armored van 3 miles back, full of people who could bring the entire weight of the federal government down on a garage in Oakhurst. She had all of it. The next driver, Cody Vance, would have pulled over on that black, rain-slicked causeway. The next one who fit a description. The next one who asked why, and got called you people for it. That one won't have a wire. That one won't have a badge. That one won't have a van. That one will have exactly what Gloria Bell had for 8 months. The truth, and no one who has to listen to it. So the question this story leaves you with, the one it does not answer, because it can't, is this: how many of them are still sitting in a holding cell right now, tonight, telling the truth to a room that thinks they're weather? If this one stayed with you, if that photograph of her wrists is going to sit in your chest for a while, then do something with it. Hit like, so this reaches the next person. Share it with someone who needs to think about the difference between a consequence and a victory, and subscribe. Because we go into the shadows every week to pull these stories into the light. And drop me a comment. At what exact moment did you know the machine had them? Was it the money in the garage, the terminal going red, or the second Sloan set that badge down on the steel table? I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one. This has been a work of fiction. All persons, departments, and cities depicted are fictional, and any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.